Western counterparts are very much afraid of deepening relationship between Russia and China. Russia is listening to the Chinese position very carefully about Ukraine. Sooner or later, but this initiative will be the fundamental base for the future peace. It's about a completely new interaction to build a world where Russia and China will feel secure.
As we all know, China's leader Xi Jinping arrived in Moscow on Monday for the summit with President Putin. So what made this happen, and what do you think are the achievements of Xi's visit this time?
This time it's very special and very exceptional because of international environment, which is extremely turbulent. And we did hear a lot of speculations in the previous period about, primarily in the West, of course, about the essence of relationship between Russia and China. So the Western position is to try to demonstrate that Russian and Chinese leadership are not on the same wave. And on the one hand, Western counterparts are very much afraid of deepening relationship between Russia and China. On the other hand, they do everything to undermine it. And I think that this visit has demonstrated absolutely clearly a couple of things. I think people in Russia are extremely positive about Chinese position, because China is declaring its will to restore peace. Yesterday, during this visit, Secretary Blinken officially, publicly said that he was, and the United States administration were against any peace agreements in Ukraine because they believe it's not a good solution. That's absolutely unbelievable what they are saying, actually. And so the negotiations between President Putin and Chairman Xi demonstrated, first of all, that Russia is listening to the Chinese position very carefully about Ukraine, about this conflict. Secondly, Russia and China are close to the relationship, which is not an alliance, of course, but something very, very close to alliance. And the leaders and the nations understand each other very well. And I think that what President Xi said to President Putin when he left Kremlin, that we live in times when everything is changing as 100 years ago. And then he added that Russia and China will work together in this situation. That's absolutely new quality of our relationship, and it's highly appreciated in Moscow.
So you just mentioned about the Russian-Ukraine conflicts, and I think the two leaders has talked about this, and they have a joint statement last night. So how do you think of this joint statement? And as we all know, last month China issued a broad 12-point framework, which is part of a global security initiative. So how do you think the link between the joint statement yesterday and the Chinese positions paper?
Russia certainly supports the position paper issued by Chinese leadership a couple of weeks ago. This is a setup of principles which are absolutely indispensable to achieve peace in Ukraine, and not only in Ukraine. That's just universal framework for any peace settlement of any conflict. And I think Russian side, both political establishment and broader public, were very much impressed by the recent achievement by Chinese diplomacy when China managed to help Iran and Saudi Arabia to reach a normalization relationship which is an absolute landmark agreement for the whole Middle East. So this is the first time China demonstrated that Beijing is one of diplomatic capitals of the world, actually, a real big player, big actor in the international scene. And I'm sure, and I agree with President Putin, what he said yesterday, that sooner or later, but this initiative will be the fundamental base for the future peace.
Yeah, so do you think will it be any movements between China and Russia?
As Americans used to say, it needs two to tango. So peace negotiations, peace, work on peace agreement is only possible if both sides of the process understand that they need it. As I said, it's not the case yet. Not the case on the Ukrainian side, not the case on the Western side. Exactly the opposite. What we hear and what we see, this is a strong commitment of the United States and the European Union to fuel this conflict, to enhance military support of Ukraine, including new models and new kinds of weapons. As British Defense Ministry said yesterday, they will send to Ukraine ammunition with depleted uranium, which is actually a new stage of escalation. And unfortunately, Russia, which demonstrated several times its will to launch a peace process, starting from a year ago, actually, when this process, the negotiating process started, and Ukraine at that point was a bit more eager to have this talks, but it was basically prohibited by Americans and British. And in this situation, again, I'm absolutely sure that after a while, when Ukrainians and the West will understand that they have no chance to win, I mean militarily win in this war, they will be back to the negotiating table, and on this table we will see the Chinese proposal.
China and Russia have very good cooperations in the fields such as economy, trade, and political and cultural exchange. And plus, China and Russia have upgraded relations for the new era. So what are your expectations for the future of China and the Russian relations?
The world will face enormous turbulence, and this turbulence will be based on attempts by the United States to keep hegemony in the international affairs. And Americans, as we know, they will do basically everything to destroy all who challenge their primacy, to challenge their hegemonic status. Which means that for Russia and China, it's not just a cooperation for development, for mutual benefit, and so on. This is cooperation for survival in this new world. And this is a cooperation for to build a new international system, basically. I think this is just science of understanding, that this is not about just another kind of partnership, even strategic partnership. It's about a completely new interaction to build a world where Russia and China will feel secure. Without that, we will not be able to feel it.